welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all for sticking with me through this journey. One of the really cool things that I talk about a lot is that not only do I get to share my own story, my own personal experience with pediatric cancer, but I get to share the stories of other organizations and organizations that we have specifically had personal connections to. And today's organization is just that. We had a personal connection to them. They are the Pinkyswear Foundation that sent something to our daughter JC when she was going through her treatments. So I very much remember them. Today my guest is Mary Beth, and she is going to not only share a personal connection to pediatric cancer, but also share more about the Pinkyswear Foundation and what they're all about. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Curtis.
Absolutely.
An honor.
So tell me about, number one, tell me a little bit about yourself and about what your personal connection is to pediatric cancer.
So I never in a million years thought that I would be involved in the world of childhood cancer. I think all of us in the community would probably agree that was something that happens to other families. This childhood cancer is something that happens to people out there. I have a very unique background because my dad is actually a retired radiologist, and he was fellowship trained at St. Jude Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. And so I actually grew up around childhood cancer. I knew what it was. I visited kids in the hospital when I was younger, but I never expected it to come crashing into my own life with my own children. And so our story directly with childhood cancer began in 2018 when my youngest child, James, was diagnosed with bilateral Wilms tumor when he was just 15 months old. And so that's really where our family experienced childhood cancer firsthand.
And it's a very unique connection because not only obviously the personal side of it with your son, but with the fact that I think a lot of us in this world in general, and myself included, are, I don't want to say, I mean, maybe the word is ignorant to the fact of how prevalent pediatric cancer is, because you're growing up in a world, and if you're not immersed in it, it's very easy to just kind of walk on by. You go to the hospital as a kid or even as an adult and have no idea that, 6 or 7 floors up, that there are children battling the worst thing in the world. And so you have a little bit more of an insight on that to be able to be around it and understand it. But so many of us, I think, were just, when we were thrown into this, on an island, 100%, no idea what to even expect.
I think the concept that it's rare, people always say, oh, it's so rare, it's not going to happen to me. But the statistics, it's not common, but the statistics aren't as rare as what people think. I think it's now 1 in 264 children are diagnosed with some form of cancer. And so it's not as rare as people, I think, want to believe. But when it happens to you, I'm sure you can relate to this. It was the last thing. I think a lot of parents who have a child with cancer, they went to the clinic or they went to the hospital or they asked a family friend who might be a physician. They thought it was anything else besides childhood cancer. For my family, we thought our son was constipated. We thought maybe he had a bowel obstruction. And obviously, when we heard the words that your child, our son, had cancer, we were shocked.
It is unbelievably mind-blowing that I will say that 99 out of 100 parents that I have spoken to, almost the number one symptom is constipation. That almost always leads to and I don't understand it, and there's got to be some kind of medical research guideline that takes you into that direction. But every single time, and yeah, for us it was weeks and weeks and weeks. We joke about it because if you don't, you're going to cry.
Right.
That our daughter was on enough laxatives to put a horse down, and it wasn't doing anything, wasn't moving anything, and yet it was okay. Well, keep doing this, and it'll get better. And I always want to make sure that I preface it by saying I don't think it's the medical community that doesn't want to help. I think that they don't have the tools in the toolbox to properly catch these things early, or the fact that they're just not looking, saying, okay, it's constipation, it's not brain cancer. You know what I mean? They're not reaching that far, and I get it. And that's, you don't want to scare people and you don't want to jump to those conclusions, but we also have to be open to looking into those, those options, because as parents, unfortunately, what we're not supposed to do is be Google doctors, but we do it, right? We do our research and we know a lot of things, and we're going to question it. So, but yeah, that symptom seems to line up with almost everybody I've ever spoken to. Not that it means that if you have constipation, you need to worry about it being something bigger, but it really seems to be something that is almost always attached for some reason.
Our pediatrician, I got to ask her a little bit in depth at why she finally sent James, my son, in for additional testing. And she said, at first I wasn't actually worried about the belly distension. I thought it was just constipation. But then the belly distension comboed with ongoing fever that wasn't associated with teeth or any other cause is what kind of put her over the edge. And she said, in hindsight, she thinks that the constipation and fevers being the probably number 1 and 2 symptoms of childhood cancer are correlated with the inflammation markers that are going through their tiny little bodies when they're battling. Their own immune systems are actively trying to fight the cancer.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And for us, you always look for that one trigger, right? And I know for us, that was continuing. There's other little symptoms here and there, but nothing that would have drawn us to something bigger. And then one day her eye just turned inward, just one, when she would look straight at you and it would turn in. And she said she couldn't tell, it didn't affect her vision. And that prompted, luckily my sister works for an eye doctor. We got her in an emergency visit, and they say she has swelling of the optic nerve, which is not good. If you Google that, the first thing you see is brain tumor. Right. And of course, the way I am is 100% 180 from my wife. I am very much an optimist and a denier of that being what's wrong, right? My kid does not have cancer. Absolutely not. But, that prompted everything that got us to the point where we could actually treat it. But, it's the wait and watch that we feel in this community is so much right in front. Like, that's almost what we're always told. Once you get into to find a diagnosis, wait and watch. Once we're doing treatment, it's wait and watch. To see if this treatment is actually working before we try something else, we're going to wait and watch. And at the same time, we're falling apart because we as parents are supposed to be those protectors, right?
Right. And even after it's over, it's monitoring and wait and watch and pray that it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I can't, like, we're obviously in a position where, our daughter passed away, and we have to kind of live with that every day and live with, feeling like I feel like a failure. I always have. I know that I'm not. I know that we did everything we could, but in my heart, I feel like I failed because as a dad, I'm supposed to protect my kids. And, I feel sometimes that I'm in a better position, and I don't know how to put it without it sounding bad, and I hope it doesn't come off that way. But sometimes I feel like my wife and I are in a better position because our daughter is no longer fighting it, and we're not on the edge of our seat every day. Because I know how that feels, to be waiting for scans and the other shoe to drop, and what we deal with the treatments and stuff like that can cause so much more later in life that it's almost like once treatment ends, the real fight begins. And Again, I hope it comes off the right way because it's not meant to be derogatory in any way. It's just that, now we're not waking up every day with knots in our stomach and wondering, oh God, she doesn't feel well today, or she's lethargic today, or she threw up this morning, or she's got a new bruise. And all of those things take on a new dynamic once you get a diagnosis like cancer.
A friend of mine who also lost her daughter to actually the same form of cancer that my son had, she wrote a beautiful post and explained it in a very illustrative way that she said, before childhood cancer, families are on this side of a valley where they're blissfully unaware of the realities of childhood cancer. And then regardless of the outcome, all families park it on the other side. And there's this chasm that there's no going back to life before childhood cancer. There's no way to overcome the jadedness that we all feel, regardless of the outcome of our children, because we don't get the benefit of saying, oh, I'm sure it's just constipation, or I'm sure they just have a fever. I think most parents would agree. They always in the back of their mind think, is this cancer? And there's no going back to that, which it's a hard reality to face, and to how do you carry forward without just being bitter and angry. But also, like what you're doing with this podcast, finding ways to give back and to support and to raise awareness and make a difference. That's why I am working at Pinkyswear now, is I needed to do something with the heartache and the trial that our family experienced.
I absolutely agree. I think and I always say that there's two different types of parents within this community, and neither one of them is wrong or right. It's just there's two different types. When you're going through all of it, when it's over, meaning either the child is done with treatments and they're moving on with life and they're doing their thing, or their child passes, there's parents that go two different directions. One is that they take it on headstrong, become advocates, start organizations, all of that. And the other side is that they do the Homer Simpson meme into the bush and they never want to be associated with it ever again. And again, neither one is the right or wrong way to go. It's just I don't see ever a middle ground in there. I think that we find ourselves, I think, as parents, and now even more so than ever, analyzing, other families that are going through it, the kids, seeing the same symptoms, seeing the milestones, the markers, the fears, the worries, all of that, and saying, man, that looks a lot like what we just saw. That looks not so good, not so bad. And we struggle with how much do we actually let out of our mouth versus just keep it to ourselves. Because, in the end, everybody's different. Every fight is different. Every child is different. But, we also want to be that kind of that voice of reason and reality, because the unfortunate thing is that we've seen the whole thing from start to finish, the way it can go the wrong way, the way it can go all the way in the end and not the outcome that you want. And we don't want that for anybody. So, the purpose of everything that I do, whether it's social media, the podcast, our organization, is that we want other people to not feel alone, and we want them to feel like you have a support system that is by far the strongest group of people that I've ever met in my entire life.
I couldn't agree with that anymore.
So tell me about the Pinkyswear Foundation, because like I mentioned, we did get something from and I remember, and I was actually looking online the other day. I was looking at the website, kind of going over it, and I was like, I remembered the card. I remember the card that had Mitch on it, and I was actually frantically looking before the podcast to try to find it, because I know that we have it, and it's probably in my daughter's room somewhere, which is exactly the way that she left it when she passed. I know it's in there somewhere, but I was looking for it. So just tell me and tell everybody more about Pinkyswear and how it started and your involvement with it.
Yeah, so I'll start with Mitch's story. I think that seems to be the most appropriate. So Mitch was a 9-year-old little boy who lived in Minnesota, and he was battling osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer. And his family, they were set up really well in terms of they had a great community, they had a great family. They had lots of people that were doing fundraisers for their family to directly support Mitch's battle against cancer. And it was about November, December, the holidays time, and all of these really wonderful nonprofits and donors kept coming into the hospital saying, do you want an Xbox? Do you want this game? Do you want this stuffed animal? All of those comfort items that kids just love. And Mitch looked at his parents and said, I have so much stuff. I don't need this stuff. They can give it to other kids. I don't need this much stuff. And then he was talking with his dad, and there were, how oncology floors, there's rooms next to each other. You kind of get to know the parents if you're there for a long period of time. And they had talked to a family next to them, and the family was really strapped financially. They were getting all of these gifts, which was great, but they really wanted to provide special Christmas gifts to their other children, and they didn't have the money to do that. And when Mitch heard this, he got talking to his dad, and he said, it's just not fair. Like, we have a great community who is supporting us, and these other families, they don't have that same support, and I want to help them. And at first, Mitch's dad was like, we don't get into that. That's their business. There's many nonprofits and places that can help them, but we're just going to kind of focus on our family. But Mitch pushed his dad and said, no, I have money in the bank from these fundraisers, and I want to give it to these other families. So Steve, Mitch's dad, took Mitch to the bank, and they took out his life savings, which was like $7,000. And Mitch put it into orange envelopes for these different families that were on unit with him. And he and his dad went around and kind of like Secret Santa style, they dropped off these envelopes to these families so that they could have cash to be able to get something nice for Christmas or to get gifts for other people. And Steve always shares the story that after they had put the money in one room, Mitch was in a wheelchair and it hit the side of the bed. And so Mitch and Steve ran down the hallway and they got into the elevator. And Mitch looked at his dad and said, "Dad, that was the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. I want to do this every year." And Steve was really honest with his son, and he took a deep breath and, said, "Mitch, I don't think you're going to be here next year. And so I don't know if you'll be able to do this." And Mitch, without missing a beat, was like, "All right, Dad, then promise me that you'll keep doing this." And so that is where they made the Pinkyswear promise. And Steve committed to doing this for other families for the rest of his life. And Mitch unfortunately passed away the following spring. And pretty much immediately, Steve and his wife, Becky, Mitch's parents, started the Pinkyswear Foundation, fulfilling that promise that Steve had made with Mitch, that he would keep providing financial support to children with cancer and their families.
It is honestly the most heartwarming story, because these kids, and obviously I'm biased and you're biased as well, but these kids are, their hearts and their compassion for everybody else when they're going through the worst battle in their lives, right? We as adults are guilty that we think of ourselves. It's even, I even call it the oxygen mask theory, right? You're supposed to take care of yourself before you can help somebody else. These kids do it, they do it opposite. It's everybody else first. And the fact that you're saying that I'm going through this, I'm battling right now, and I'm sure struggling with treatments and things like that, having good days, bad days, but I want to make sure everybody else is taken care of. And honestly, I can say that what an amazing and strong father to be able to have, to be even able to be that honest with Mitch, that I don't think you'll be here next year. To know the kind of accept that reality and be honest with your kids. Because I honestly think it is really, really good for us, especially in this battle, to be honest with our kids, because, we don't know the realities of what are going to happen, but we're very much open to watching what's happening every single day, and the kids that we're losing and not being able to fix these issues. And so to be honest with them as much as you possibly can is so important, because they deserve the respect to have us let them know the truth. And so that really is incredible. And then to make that promise right then and there and have him not skip a beat, right, and say, "Fine, I won't be here, but you're still going to do it."
Right.
I think that's great, because you're he has now cemented his legacy and continues to push it. And I think that cannot be a more of a genuine way to start a foundation like this and start a movement, essentially, where you can, and like I said, to be personally affected by it. And I can honestly tell you, it's been 5 years. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember the envelope. I remember, I remember the card. I remember that. And a lot of that stuff, when you're going through a journey like this, to be honest with you, a lot of things came unsolicited and not necessarily, you know what I mean? And you're you're overwhelmed with the amount of support that you get from a community that you don't know. Your story, it gets out there. People hear about you, and you become part of that community. And, we started on an island, and now we're part of this group of people that, of course, nobody in their right mind ever wants to be a part of, but we would now go scorched earth for anybody in this family. Everybody here is family now. So that really is an incredible story.
I always say it's the most beautiful community of people who do not want to be part of this community. Nobody ever wants to join this club, but it is beautiful. And there's been a lot of really beautiful organizations and people that I'm forever grateful that I've met through the awful circumstance that our family's gone through.
It is that, so we have to find a silver lining in everything that we do in life. And especially right now, we have to find a silver lining. And that is the people that we meet, and the organizations and the families and the kids and the missions that we get to be a part of, because this is truly, nobody, I think, thought either that this was our mission when we got here, when we were born, when we were, becoming whatever. We didn't think, we were going to be advocates one day for this disease, but at the same time, I think we were put here for this, and now we're fulfilling that, and we're doing it through our children, and it's an honor. Obviously, one day I hope that I don't have to do this anymore because we've figured it out, and that would be ideal. But for now, we're stronger together, and we work together, and we share each other's stories, and I think that's the most powerful thing that we can do.
Yeah, that is the ultimate goal, isn't it? That we wouldn't have to do this, that we wouldn't have to advocate in this way. But I loved what you said about the unsolicited support, because I think it was a good 6 months. So my son was in treatment for bilateral Wilms for about a year. He had, many rounds of chemotherapy, had his right kidney completely removed, part of his left kidney removed, and then had post-operative chemotherapy afterwards. But in the grand scheme of what can be a childhood cancer treatment plan, ours was relatively short. But I think it took probably 6 months to a year for me to actually, in hindsight, put the puzzle pieces together of, oh, that blanket came from this organization, or that medical bill payment came from this organization. And so it took some time to put the puzzle pieces back together, because when you're in the thick of it, I think there's so many people that are like, social workers are applying for support for families on their behalf. Family and friends are doing fundraisers on behalf. And then obviously there's the support that parents themselves are reaching out for. And so it's kind of this whirlwind of me trying to figure out who helped with what. But I actually did apply to Pinkyswear because James was diagnosed in July of 2018. And after our initial hospital stay, and I think 1 or 2 rounds of chemo, we came home from the hospital, which is 2 hours away from our home. And we came home and our house was extremely hot. And I was like, hey, babe, to my husband, can you turn the air on? It's really hot in here. And he's like, I did turn on the air. And we just started like watching the temperature go up and up and up. And we learned that our HVAC system had completely failed at the peak of summer in Iowa. So it was very hot. And we had a technician come over, and he had heard what was going on with our family. And he came after he evaluated our AC unit. He showed up on our front door and just was crying. And I was like, this is not a great sign when the technician is crying. And he was like, I can't fix it. We have to replace everything. Like, there's no fix for this. And so I think I just then melted into a puddle right alongside of him. And I said, we're paying for the ambulance from diagnosis day from Des Moines, Iowa to Iowa City. That was expensive. We're paying for, the biopsy, port placement, initial chemotherapies, all of the specialists. We're paying for all of these medical bills. I took a step back from my job. And so our income is hit significantly. And then our HVAC system failed. So it was definitely, I think every parent who's gone through this is like, what else could go wrong? This is just awful. And so in that moment, I called our social worker and I was like, John, what am I supposed to do? Like, we do not have money to pay for a new HVAC system. And so it was at that point that he was like, I have very limited resources for this type of thing, but why don't you reach out to Pinkyswear? And so I Googled them, and I think I skipped the application process and just like reached out to their entire team. I was like, help me. And they were able to provide some gift cards for groceries and gas that were tremendously helpful, that we then could put that money towards this stupid HVAC system. And then about a month later, they stepped in and they were able to assist us with our mortgage payment, which obviously took a large financial burden off of our family. And it was at that time that I got the same package that you did. I got an orange envelope, which with Mitch's, he loved baseball. So we have a bunch of these baseball cards. And so I read about Mitch. I went to their website and I obviously, same reaction. I was like, this is so beautiful. And so I started getting involved in their organization. And then fast forward, when James was done with treatment, there was a very part-time job that was open at the organization. And I honestly thought I was going to be in that camp that you were talking about that was like, okay, I'm going to give back for a season and then I'm going to Homer Simpson it back into the hedge and I'm just going to close this chapter. in our lives. And I've now been with the organization for 5.5 years because I just am in love with not only this organization, but this community. Hearing about other families that are hearing the awful words, your child has cancer, my gut is that I want to help them. I want to listen to their stories. I want to say these children's names. I want to support the research, and I haven't been able to step away. And so I thought I'd be here for a year and don't think I have any plans to go elsewhere at this point in time.
I think that sentiment is mirrored in my mind too, because I know that, I work on a lot of stuff, legislatively, which takes forever and can be frustrating beyond belief. I have something else that I'm trying to work on, been working on for like 2 years, and hopefully it comes to fruition at some point in my lifetime. But my wife has always asked me, she goes, well, if you achieve that, if you get that goal, will you step back and feel like you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish? And I said, the short answer is no, because that just means that I can go even further. That means I've achieved it. Now I'm going to go for the next step. Because the reality is there's just too much work to do. Mm-hmm. And us as parents shoulder the weight, the massive majority of the weight of this issue in our world. It's not the government and it's not the people in elected positions. It's us as parents that are advocating, that are raising a majority of the money that goes to research. Philanthropy pays for most of it. It's us that's doing it. And that family support, whether it's through care packages or gift cards, the impact is just immeasurable, because there's no way to understand what a family's going through. And you mentioned taking a step back from a job. A lot of families in this community, they end up losing their jobs. They walk away from their jobs because it's money comes and goes, and you'll always find a way as a parent, but you can never replace the time with your kid. Right. Especially, not knowing what's going to happen in the next day, in the next month, in the next year. And taking that step away is often what happens, and you often end up in a very financially hard position. We received, money. The church would help us out and things like that. Absolutely. And it gave us a little bit of relief, so I could do the same thing and take unpaid time from work. And my wife was a stay-at-home mom for a majority of our children's lives, and that was always supposed to be the way it was. You stay at home, right, raise the kids, and just enjoy yourself. I'll go to work and provide. And that's the way it was. And until your world came crashing down, and now you've got to find a way out of this. But the impact that it can have, all of the organizations, no matter what you do, like I said, whether it's care packages, whether it's gift cards, financial support, all of it, it is such a huge piece of the puzzle that we have to put together. And yeah, there was a lot of stuff as well, trying to, figure out where this came from. You're looking up organizations, you're Googling, you know what I mean? And it's all incredible. And same thing with text messages and stuff. I still have text messages on my phone from phone numbers. Yep. I have no idea who they're from. So sorry. I still have unread messages sitting out in Messenger from 2018 that I've never touched. I can't with the little red bubbles, keep up with that. It's incredible though. I mean, it really honestly is. And social media is a love-hate relationship, but right, it is honestly the easiest way to get mass information out when you're going through these, the diagnosis and treatments and things like that. And so the amount of reach out, it was unbelievable. And just trying to keep up with that it's impossible, essentially. Yeah, there are so many amazing organizations that help so many families. And I always say, now officially working at Pinkyswear, we're just a piece of the community. We're not solving everybody's issues. We're not completely resolving the financial crisis that most of our families face. But if we can help, even if it's just a month or two, or even if it's just a gift card, those things make a difference for families when they're in crisis. I mean, we have one family here in Des Moines that I talk to a lot, and he always says, that orange envelope gift card, I gave it to my girls and I let them pick out whatever snacks they wanted for our trip to Mayo. And it's like, that is beautiful. If we can just give, my family personally called them precious ups during our journey, because we had a lot of really low moments. And so I always called them these precious ups, that at least for a moment,
made us smile or allowed us to breathe a little easier. Or, like you said, the most precious gift in a childhood cancer journey is time. And so if we could give a family a gift card or a mortgage payment or any support so that they can have more time with their child, with their child, that is what we want. We want them to have tangible support and know that they're not alone, and allow them to have as much time with their child as possible so that they can focus on them, their family, and their health.
It's by far the most important thing that we absolutely cannot get back. We cannot we can't turn the clock back, and we can't add more minutes to it. We are given what we were given, and being able to focus on that and have that worry off of us is by far the only thing that really, I think, it sets it apart. I know, that when my daughter was in the hospital for her stem cell transplant, in addition to one stay a few days after that, we were in the hospital, I believe, for total for 52 days, just her and myself. While my wife was home with my other 2 girls. And during that time, I was still sitting there on the computer in the hospital room, paying the bills and keeping up with, things for the business and stuff. Because number one, you've got to find some sense of normalcy in a chaotic situation.
Yeah.
But also, just trying to ensure that we stayed afloat. And honestly, it was the help of our community that got us through that, because without that, I don't know that the bills would have been paid, because I wasn't working, obviously. And, there's only so much coming in from, paid time off, and I advanced all my time. And it's, that's another situation. But having that ability and having that support is so crucial. Community support is honestly, just being there and being good people to people you don't know is so vital to the survival of just your mental health overall,
Yep. I remember being at the hospital when James was for a longer hospital stay. And I remember begging the nursing staff. This will sound legit crazy to anybody that has not lived this, but I remember begging the nursing staff. I said, "Can you get me some gloves and some sanitizing wipes and a broom? I just need to clean this room myself. I just need to do like household stuff to feel normal." And that probably sounds insane to anybody who has not lived this, but when you're in the hospital for days, weeks at a time, you start to get so antsy and claustrophobic, and anything that feels normal, whether that's taking a walk or making your own meal or doing your own laundry, feels like a little taste of home. And so I remember after James's surgery, like cleaning our hospital room just to feel normal. It was so chaotic, but it's what I did, because yeah, it is nothing about childhood cancer is normal, logical, rational, none of it.
No, and it's the prevalence of it is so much higher than anybody understands. Again, we go back to the beginning and we talked about the word rare, which I will say very, very rarely, if it, what I just won't say it, because it's not applicable to this disease within children. It's just not. I think that I often tell people, if you can go outside and you can walk 10 doors down either way on the other side of your house, you will run into at least one family that is either dealing with it right now, has had a child that passed, or is connected to somebody that is fighting it right now. You will find somebody. It's only rare because we're told that it is by a commercial, by the government, whatever. It's only rare because we're told that it is, because that's what we're made to believe. And that's what we believed our whole life growing up. If we're watching the commercials, it's under control. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. We're figuring this out. But we're here now, and I'm 44 years old, and I believe, to me, that the commercials haven't changed. We're still in the same position, if not worse, than what we were. When JC was diagnosed in 2020, the stat was 43 kids a day. Well, now I believe it's 47. We're in a position where that's not getting any better, and we're going in the backwards direction. We travel to D.C. multiple times a year, and we try to advocate as best we can for these kids, and we hear people getting excited because we might have raised the 4% to 8%. And internally, I say, who cares? Because that's still terrible. Like we're not even getting to double digits here, and you're excited about 8%, and I'm like, I don't understand the logic behind all of it, and I don't go off the rails on politics and stuff like that, but it's just like, we can't blame it here. We can't blame it here. It's a whole world problem at this point. Like, we're just not fixing it and we're not realizing it. And I think it's because, honestly, far too many people have been force-fed the idea that it's a rare situation within kids. It's under control and we don't need more funding to fix it, because what are we trying to fix if it's so rare? And unfortunately, I think too many people believe that, and it's easy for them to then scroll on social media, to walk on by if you're doing a fundraiser, and they can walk on by and it's not a big deal. It's not affecting me. But you know what? It didn't affect any of us until the day that it did, right? We were just assuming that our kids were constipated, or they had toddler belly, or, they didn't want to go to school, so they faked an illness, whatever the case may be. We're not assuming that this is what it's going to turn out to be. And then when it does, now we're in a situation where, like, look over here, listen to what I'm telling you. This is not just a small problem.
Right. And it's a hard battle. I mean, it's hard. I've talked to my friends a lot about it, and, they've said, well, how can we get more involved? How can we come alongside of your family? How can we do this? And it's like, supporting organizations that support kids with cancer and their families is a great way to go. But I've even said, try to put yourself in my shoes. My infant was diagnosed with cancer. Our hospital was 2 hours away from our house. But he was then treated with chemotherapy from the 1970s that was developed for adults. My child is not a guinea pig. My child deserves to have cutting edge technology and treatment, just like other diseases and just like other illnesses. And I mean, the fact that my son, for the rest of his life, will have to have heart monitoring because he was given the red devil one time, that is a hard pill to swallow as a parent. We literally are poisoning our children to bring them to the brink in order to try to save them. And not every child makes it. That's devastating. So I've said, I know it's hard, but just try not to look away. Like, look at the realities of what these families are facing. Those are the options on the table. It's hard.
It is, to ask anybody to put themselves in that situation. Obviously, as a parent, right, you have that block. Like, absolutely not. I can't think of my kids going through that, or something. Neither can we. But we weren't given that opportunity to make that choice, to not think about it. We were forced into it and had to deal with it, and we had to decide, how strong are we going to be? How hard are we going to fight? How much are we going to put into this? And obviously the answer is 1,000,000%. We're not going to stop until we figure this out. And yes, unfortunately, far too many of us, 1,500 every single year, are saying goodbye to our kids, are watching them take their last breath. And it's not fair. It's not fair that we don't have any other options, that we're dealing with decades-old treatments that are not providing what we need them to provide. And on top of that, you're getting a binder that's 2 inches thick about how bad it can be after treatment because of the treatment. You know?
I remember with James, I'd like to think that when James was in treatment, I was like cool, calm, and collected. In hindsight, I know that I was a little spicy, and there are 3 or 4 scenarios where I lost my mind. I absolutely lost my mind. And one of those times was when so oncology parents know this. People who haven't gone through it probably don't. When a child is diagnosed with cancer, they are typically given a protocol for whatever cancer they have. Having my dad be a radiologist was extremely helpful. And I felt like I had, kind of a trump card because I had a dad who was trained in all of this complex medical stuff. My dad was very helpful at saying, MaryBeth, the protocol is written for the masses. It is the best treatment plan for this disease on a massive scale. But every regimen, every diagnosis is super complex. And at the cellular level, every human being is different, which is why 2 children, the same gender, the same diagnosis, the same age, can have the exact same treatment plan, and one will quote unquote work and the other will have a really awful outcome. What I wish people understood was They have these protocols, they have these plans, and families have to advocate for their children. They have to be willing to kind of duke it out with the medical team, because again, the medical team are operating under protocols, which are the treatment plans that work for, they're designed for hundreds of kids, not your one individual child. And the one time that I really, really lost my mind is James's protocol called for Wilms tumor, it's typically surgery, chemo, radiation. Well, James's tumor was not operable upon diagnosis. And so from the get-go, we were on a different protocol. And so we did chemotherapy, surgery, and then more chemotherapy. We got sent to an adult radiation oncologist to meet with him about a radiation plan for James. And I could not comprehend. I was like, why are you wanting to do radiation on my child? He has no evidence of disease. He's gone through treatment. Why would you radiate my child now? And the oncologist sat in front of me and said, well, it's the protocol. And I said, James didn't ever follow the protocol. He broke protocol on day one when he didn't have surgery. He had chemotherapy. And I said, I'm not signing him up for this very aggressive radiation protocol unless you can tell me evidence-based that he's going to have a better outcome. And he sat me down, and I kid you not, I said, what's James's recurrence rate if he does not do radiation? And he said, 2%. And I said, okay. What's the secondary cancer rate if he does do radiation? And he said, 3%. I said, so done. He's not doing radiation. If he has a higher percentage of a secondary cancer than he does recurrence, we're not doing this.